It's the spooky episode of What I Saw in 2021. Which basically means I'm talking about horror movies.
Hey, what are you guys doing out here?
It's Halloween. We've been trick-or-treating.
Are you alone?
There's a creepy man in a white mask.
Where?
It's that time of year again. Weather is cooling down, the smell of fireplaces fill the night air, and Michael Myers is murdering half of a small town. It's Halloween Kills, the 12th entry in the franchise, but the third movie in its continuity. Sequel to 2018's Halloween, which is a sequel to 1978's Halloween. David Gordon Green returns as director and also writing the screenplay with Danny McBride and Scott Teems. Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, and Andy Matichak come back as Laurie Strode and Karen and Allison Nelson respectively. James Jude Courtney and Nick Castle are our shape with a penchant for neck eviscerating. To make this quick, Halloween Kills is split like a Haddonfield resident. The story is a mix of what Halloween was originally and what people think Halloween is after decades of additional movies. At times, the themes and moral is strong and interesting. The town's mission of evil dies tonight leads to them becoming questionably just as evil and barbaric as the one guy it seems to all be about, but mixing in some of the worst dialogue that sounded like it was written for the trailer, and it's grosser to hear in actual conversations. It's full of trailer lines.
No one told you.
Told me what?
Evil dies tonight.
What do we do?
We fight. The more he kills, the more he transcends. He's coming for me, but I'm coming for him.
You have some brutal kills and shocking moments, especially at the end, but most characters end up where they are because everyone makes dumb and nonsensical decisions. Horror movies are full of stupid choices to move the plot along, but how many times is this fake out shit with Mike gonna keep happening? The setup with him versus the neighborhood was pretty satisfying, but you can assure how it all ends up. Almost cheapening the payoff with it only happening because people don't do the one thing they had to do. Halloween Kills is fine to satisfy for an average slasher fan, but if you're hoping to get what is almost promised to you, maybe it'll be in Halloween Ends.
My husband took the boat out on the lake. He took a handgun that I didn't even know that we owned, and...
The Night House is a psychological horror film about a woman in mourning over her late husband and begins to experience strange occurrences around her lake house, and secrets of her husband come into light. Directed by David Buckner and is written by Ben Collins and Luke Piotrowski. The trailer for this film may make you think this movie is about one thing, but in fact the alternative is a lot better than I was anticipating. It's a mix of simplicity in its message and allegories, but had a lot of complex elements and emotions. You may have a hunch on where it may be going, but you'll be on the edge of your seat and wondering what the truth is behind it all. Mixed in, we have performances, led by Rebecca Hall, who lets you feel the pain she's going through. The anger and desperation for closure are all too relatable. On top of that, a climax to a movie is so calm in its visuals, yet emotionally taxing. The visuals in the whole movie is fantastic. Imaginative uses of shape, shadows, framing, and lighting. You'll be fighting the urge on learning more, but worried what will pop out if you keep digging. The Night House can be a tough sit for people going through a lot at the moment, but maybe look up its themes and scene details if you're curious. If you read up on it and think you could take what it has to offer, go for it. It's a movie I highly recommend for a lot of film fans for the different avenues it has to offer in story and visuals.
You're safe now.
Safe from what?
Do you know what we wouldn't have found if we would have stayed on the trail? The waterfall, the cliff.
When you hear a horror franchise is rebooting itself and it never had a reputation besides being guilty pleasures to begin with, it may shock you when the product ends up being weirdly well made. Wrong Turn is directed by Mike P. Nelson and written by Alan B. McElroy. Our main forest trap fodder is played by Charlotte Vega and Adrian Bradley, with the wily coyote of the woods is helmed by Bill Sage. Credit where it's due, the direction and camera work is pretty good. The script is also taking modern elements and playing on them with a new version of violent Loraxes. Instead of speaking for the trees, they murder with them. But you can't make 7 movies of a series and not write equally bad contrived setups. Characters have to get to a certain point, so you give them random extras with "I'm gonna die soon" signs taped on their backs to show them where they need to go, and it's your turn to take a wrong turn. Most of the characters are pretty unlikable, and that's not counting the Foundation Rube Goldberg cultists. One thing I'll specify with the writing is the ending with our leads. Vega, who plays Jen, goes the whole movie not knowing where she's going in life and looking for her calling. Bradley, who plays her boyfriend Darius, is in a successful career and helping lots of people and doing what he seems to enjoy. So it's perfectly logical that when the cult ship breaks down, Darius is totally on their side in a few days, and Jen is headstrong and planning an entire escape. Maybe characters were swapped in a rewrite, but they forgot to change the names. Don't know, but you should care about this movie if you want a decent little horror movie for spooky times to turn to.
This is where it all began. The story of Candyman.
Candyman is a sequel to Candyman, about the return of Candyman, a supernatural boogie Candyman who kills you after you say his name 5 times while looking in a mirror. Candyman, directed by Nia DaCosta, who also wrote the movie with Jordan Peele and Wynn Rosenfeld, starring Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as Anthony McCoy, an artist who falls down the Candyman rabbit hole and brings the legend back. The most shocking thing about this movie is that it's actually a sequel, not a reboot or remake, because it's called Candyman. But I guess that's just what horror movies do now. Looking at you, Halloween and soon-to-be-released Scream, aka Scream 5, aka Scream. Anyway, I'll say for a reboot of a slasher franchise from the 90s, this held up pretty well. The people involved obviously gave me confidence, but good workers never stopped a movie from snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Really creative visuals and sequences, the subtext and really just text of the modern correlations to the original movie's symbolism of racial injustice is also done smart and I'd say pretty effective, but sometimes delves into too many ideas. The performances overall are enjoyably intense, and some sticking out like this is still a cheap slasher movie from the 90s time period, which could be fun, but doesn't mesh with the rest of the movie sometimes. Though for a movie that has an eye-catching direction, boy oh boy, the writing is kind of all over the place. The mythos is easy to follow because they literally explain it for you for people like me who waddled into the theater thinking it was the first movie again. But due to it being a continuation of the first movie, a twist comes up that if you saw the original movie, you know what actually happened. Don't know how this translates as a whole, and some deaths are kind of just dumb setups. The Candyman lore and timing of kills can be confusing because it's not really consistent. They do this weird trade-off on who says his name, which doesn't seem like how that works. There's a big plot issue you see a lot where if someone just did the normal human reaction, the movie would be over in like 20 minutes. This guy's arm is deteriorating off of his body, and he waits until the climax can happen to find out the big plot detail that could have happened earlier. It's a movie with a lot going on, and for every strength and nuanced topics, there's also it being goofy and overstepped spooky flick. It's a decent movie to be buzzing about.
My victim.
This is not real. It's not real.
I'm having visions.
Malignant is a horror movie. Or is it? Probably. Anyway, it's about a lady who starts seeing visions of gruesome murders from a dark-cloaked creature after getting bonked on the head from her abusive husband. But there's more to these visions than meets the eye. James Wan came up with the story and directs the film, which is written by Akela Cooper, starring Annabelle Wallace as our distressed vision haver. Malignant is a divisive watch for plenty of reasons, and you can make decent arguments for either liking or disliking it. I personally like the batshitness that gets into happening here. I say the movie is maybe a horror film, but I don't think it's just that. It has the visual aesthetic of a James Wan horror movie, but the tone and story itself is obviously self-aware on how insane the plot gets. I don't want to spoil it because it's an experience you should decide for yourself. The opening scene honestly will set the tone for what you should expect for the rest of the movie. Some criticisms can argue about the pacing is slow or unbalanced, but I never felt that personally. The tone may seem to shift around and that might be unintentional at times. I had a lot of fun when the movie wanted me to have fun, and the horror tension scenes are pretty effective. Like Candyman suffers from person doesn't go to the hospital sooner because the movie won't happen syndrome, which is just as distracting. The marketing might mislead you to what you're actually getting into, but I say go in with an open mind and just let the weird flow through you. It's a horror movie that I know at the very least I'll remember more than anything.
Who are you, Gabriel?
That wraps up this pants-pooping scary edition of What I Saw in 2021. See you next time with a slightly less scary version. Unless it's more horror movies, which it might. Alright, bye.